Good morning, students. Welcome back to the next session of compiler constructions. Well, in the previous session, we have seen a concept on extended BNF, where we have seen that a BNF can how it can be extended. I mean, like if a given BNF will be there, that means how you can decrease the number of lines of grammars by using the terminology which will be used in the topic of extended BNF. So this is regarding which we have covered in the previous session. So that what we have covered is we have covered that uh, like we have covered basically we have covered parse trees and syntax trees, and we have seen the difference between a parse tree and a syntax tree, that how this parse tree and syntax tree can be get differentiated with an examples. We have seen that the parse trees and abstract syntax trees can be represented, and along with that we have seen EBNF. In order to understand EBNF concept, that is extended part of BNF, first we have seen what does a BNF stands for, how this BNF represents for. I mean, like how in order to represent an unambiguous grammar, BNF will be used, and this BNF will be used for context-free grammar, along with a little bit history of information for BNF. And we have seen that how this BNF will be used in EBNF. I mean, like what are the extensions by which existing BNF can get converted into EBNF. So this is something which we have seen with some examples as well. Now today we are going to see the concept as syntax diagrams. So previously, whatever in the previous session we have seen is about EBNF. So if I say EBNF is how a grammar, a set of productions which represents different terminals and different non-terminals. Now, if I used to represent in a graphical representation, whenever if I look, why we are using the syntax diagram is because looking the grammar in a traditional way, like as we have seen in the previous session, or else instead of that, if we represent them in a graphical way, then what happens is that that EBNF is easy to understand, and it will become very easy to get to know that how this EBNF going to be get works over there. So that is the role of syntax diagram here. So this basically syntax diagram is how the graphical representation of the EBNF, I mean the rules which you have adopted in EBNF, the grammar which you have taken, using that grammar, how can you represent the graphical representation? So that representation is itself is your syntax diagrams. So this syntax diagram, how this will be represented in graphical terms? That is one question. First, we know that if you're representing this EBNF in graphical representation, it means it becomes as syntax diagram. Now the question here is how you are making the syntax diagram in terms of graphical representation. That means how you are representing graphically. I mean, like what are the symbols? What are the symbols? Or what? How are you designing the syntax diagram? There is a question here in that sense. Basically, as you know that EBNF contains a set of terminals, a set of non-terminals, and there is a production. That production will let you know that how a non-terminal is going to go with either a terminal or the non-terminal. So that is about EBNF. So now what we are taking is that we are taking terminals or else we are taking non-terminals in terms of box representation, and in order to connect those terminals with non-terminals or non-terminals with terminals, or else you need to, if I want to show the sequencing, that how this sequencing has been maintained here. So in order to maintain or in order to show the sequencing, we are using arrow lines. So basically what it contains here is that the representation, graphical representation contains boxes. Okay, we have to see now which type of boxes and what are the types of boxes that can be used in syntax diagrams. So these boxes are used to represent terminals as well as non-terminals. And in order to show the sequencing, what we are using is we are using arrow lines. So in that way, we are going to represent here. Now, what are the types of boxes which you are been using in order to represent either terminal or non-terminal. If you're using a round box, or if you're using an oval box, okay, oval shaped box or round shaped box, then that box are actually used to indicate what? Terminals. I mean, whenever by the shape itself only, by the shape of a box itself only, one can understand that this is something a terminal. Okay, that's why we actually wants to increase the readability of EBNF by representing in a graphical representation. So that work has to be done by syntax diagram. And if the box is, let us assume if it is, can be a square box or it can be a rectangular shaped box, then that type of boxes are actually being used to indicate non-terminals. Okay, so in that sense, a terminal and a non-terminal has been going to be get differentiated by the shape of the box, which will be taken while representing the syntax diagram. So now let us take an example that how we are going to take this expression in terms of syntax diagram. If you consider one example, here we have taken one example here where this expression is actually giving to term, okay, or else this can be represented in this way. This is how something expression is equal to term plus term, right, or else, or it can be represented either term minus term, because this is grouping concepts which we have done for addition and subtraction. Term minus term or simply term. Why simply term? Because this is curly braces. So curly braces, it indicates that, what it indicates? It indicates that it can have 0 or more occurrences. As you know, if 0 or more occur, if it is 0 occurrences, means simply this expression will represent it as just term. Now what we are doing is that we need to take this production into representing what? A syntax diagram. Now first we need to know what can be the terminal and what can be the non-terminal over here. So the terminal is here, term is your terminal, right? Term is your terminal, and plus or minus are non-terminal. So this term is a terminal and plus or minus is non-terminal. Now you know this is how you're starting. So you're just taking this expression which tends to term. Term is your non-terminal. So like I said, your expression can give you as term, simple. So term means here it going to be term, and if it is a single term means this line will be executed. For example, if you are taking expression is equals to term plus term, then what going to happen here? How the things will going to perform? This term will come, and here this sequencing will be followed. Term again plus term, and again it going to be get completed. And it can be repeated, you know, it is not something that it is has to perform just for term plus term, it can be repeated for any number of time. If it is term minus term, then what is going to happen here is this term, again what happens, it will take this turn and this minus will be executed over this part. So term minus term, again it going to get end here, or you can execute for one more time or multiple number of times. So in this way, this is how a syntax diagram has been represented for the given production. Okay, so this is one example in order to represent how a syntax diagram can going to be get represented. What we need to know is, we need to know what are terminals and what are non-terminals, and the direction of flow. Arrow will indicate the sequencing, right? Because three things are being used here. So we have implemented all of these three things in a single diagram. Similarly, if you go with the second example here, if you're taking if statement, you know, like if I'm taking if statement, I can have two statements. I mean, like if expression, if that expression is true, then this statement will going to be get executed. What if the expression is not true, then what happens? Else part will going to be get executed. So here we have not taken curly braces. Here we have taken what? Here just we have taken square brackets. So this square brackets indicates that it either executes for 0 time or just for 1 time. Okay, that means this part will execute for either for 0 time or 1 time. 0 time means if this expression is true, here only it get terminated. But if this expression is false, then it executes for 1 time. So here else part will execute only when if what happens if this expression doesn't satisfy, so that else part will execute. That's why for this we have taken in square brackets here. Now we need to know that what are the things like terminals and non-terminals if we assume here. So you can say that this expression is not something the end part, it is something the middle part, internal part. Because of that only the things has to be get determined. So that's why what we are keeping here is this expression as what your non-terminal. Now what is going to happen here is that the statement as well, you know, this statement, like if you see observe here also, what is that what we have said is, the square or the rectangular box is actually a non-terminal, right? So here, so this expression, or this statement, generally if I take expression then it will won't be any problem, but as you know it is related with a statement. So here that means, any time it starts with a non-terminal. So here I am going to start with a non-terminal, and by this non-terminal it is going with the terminal side. So as and when it is going to the terminal side, so the statement is the final end part here. So as you know it is about the end part here, so that's why it is going to be gained over here. Okay, if not, then what happen, else will execute here. So when it executes for else, so as you know else is how something which has to derive some more thing from that. So that's why you can consider them as a non-terminal, and the statement is what the final part, that is how you are taking as a terminal over here. So in that sense you are executing this part, and this expression, if this expression is valid, right, so a statement will execute. So here you are getting, you have to assume them as a, you have to assume them as what, terminal, because using this non-terminal you are going to get this expression. So that's why we have taken if and else as your non-terminals. In the previous case also, here what we have taken, round and oval box. So the same thing even applies over here. So in that sense you are representing the syntax diagram. Similarly, if you go with the another syntax diagram example here, if you observe this example, so this is an example which we have given here as a statement. So this is actually your BNF, and this is how you have converted into eBNF, right? So eBNF, how you have converted here, because if you go with if statement, you have two separate statements, either if expression statement or else if expression statement else statement. So you are using this by single statement, that's why it becomes as in a part of your eBNF. Now expression again here it is zeros or ones, which is what your non-terminal, sorry, which is your terminal, because zeros are ones your terminals. So what we are doing here is that you are using the same part here and you are trying to execute the same part over here. So that's why what we are taking here is that we are taking if statement and you are taking others. Others means like if you go with this line, if statement or others. So or is there, so that means this statement either go to this side, either it goes to this side. So any of the two sides. So or means there will be two direction, that means branching will happen if you take an or operation over here. If you go with the next part, if you go with the, the next line, what is going to happen if statement is there. So here you are taking if, and this is how expression you are taking, and this is what your statement. So if expression statement has been taken, and here if you observe here carefully, what is going to happen is that you are taking this else part. So here what we are doing is that if this statement will executes, okay, so after this, if this statement is valid, if this statement is valid means this line will it will execute, okay, this line, in this line it will execute. If this statement is not valid, I mean, like, what is the alternate part of that? Else part. So it will try to come in this part, else part, and it will execute here, and it will conclude over here. So in this way, what is going to happen is that if statement or if else statements will work in a two different ways. I mean, like, if statement works, if it executes, then the above line will execute, this line will execute, or else if this statement is not valid, then this else part will going to be get executed. Similarly, in expressions, what we have we can take what the values over here. So this values we are taking, you know, again there is 0 or 1. So here we are taking 0, or else we are taking another value, okay, whichever value you can take, it is just for demonstration purpose. So you can take any other value based on either 0 or 1, or any value, depends on the grammar. So in that sense, what is going to happen is that you can frame the syntax diagram. So like this, what you can do is you can represent the grammar in way of in the way of syntax diagrams. Okay. So this is how a syntax diagram will be used for extended BNF, and generally this will be useful for representing eBNF in a visual representation. I mean, like, by with the help of graphical representation. So this is regarding about syntax diagram. So now moving toward the next concept is regarding the context-free language, the properties of context-free language. So before going to the properties of context-free language, first we need to understand what this context-free language stands for. As you people know that a context-free grammar, how this context-free grammar will be used. So this context-free grammar, what is the difference between the context-free grammar, and we have seen with a normal example that how this context-free grammar, what are the differences you can find over here. Now, you know, for every grammar there is a set of strings that can support, that can satisfy the grammar, and you know the language is how the collection of strings. So whenever any language indicates that a set of strings which satisfies the given grammar G, we are assuming the grammar as G here, and if this grammar G is what your context free grammar, and if I represent L as a language which is set of strings, okay, set of different strings that satisfies by the given language L. So if that language, if you want to make L as a context free language, what is the condition is that the given grammar G should be a context free grammar. What you can say by this part, what you can say that whenever a language L is said to be as a context free language, provided the given language L satisfies the property of grammar G over here. If this L will satisfies that the G is the context free grammar, then you can say that L is a context free language. So this context free, this is about context free grammar. Next is your context free languages. Anyhow, this will be generated with the help of context free grammar only. That means with the help of grammar, you are generating number of strings, and the set of strings forms your language. So that's why what you can say is that context free languages will be generated with the help of context free grammars. And previously in the previous session I said you that as regular languages are the subset of context free grammars. I repeating the term, as regular language is the subset of context free language. It means that what statement you can assume from that whatever the regular language is there, all regular languages will be context free languages. Any language, if it is a regular language, it shows that it is also a context free language. But there is another side in that whatever the context free language, if we assume, will not always be a regular language, because like, this is how what context free language, I mean context free grammar, and this is how a regular language. So here if I take regular language here, and this is I have taken context free language. So all regular languages will be context free language, but what you say, all context free language will not be a regular language. So in that way, you can get this, and mostly context free grammars are based on arithmetic expressions. In the previous class session also, while generating parse trees, we have seen examples on arithmetic expressions, because we have seen the concept of abstract syntax trees. So that abstract syntax trees are also based on arithmetic expressions. So that is why mostly the context free grammars are used for generating arithmetic expressions. And therefore the language, the expressions, whatever you achieve, are the part of context free language. So this is some introduction on context free language. Now if you need to know the properties of context free languages, so here we are going to learn now the closure property of context free language. The closure property means, what do you mean by that is that whenever, if you are taking any two language, let us assume I take L1 and L2, I take L1 and L2, and I said that L1 is also a context free language and L2 is also a context free language. And if I perform operations such as union, concatenation, okay, so what is going to happen among two language is that the result of this one should also be a context free language. So that's why what you can say that context free languages are closed under. I mean, like if you perform L1 union L2, then this L1 union L2, the language what you are derived from L1 union L2 is should be also be a context free language. If this L1 union L2 is a context free language, it means you can say that it is satisfying, or you can say that the union is closed under context free language. I mean, you can say that context free language are closed under unions. Similarly, if I perform concatenation also in the same way by taking L1 and L2, and the result of this I'll get as again the same CFL, I mean context free language, then I can say that context free languages are closed under concatenation. Now remember one thing, for performing union operation and for performing concatenation operation, we require two languages. Just we have taken an example just now is L1 and L2. So in order to perform that, we require two languages. But for performing a third operation, that is clean closure operator, we just require a single language. So what you can say is that if L1 is a language and if I perform L1 clean closure, then if this L1 clean closure is also a CFL, I mean if it is also a context free language, then you can say that context free languages are closed under clean closure operator. Now what is going to happen is that in the second part there are two properties like such as intersection and complementation, which are not closed under, I mean the context free languages are not closed under either instruction or in intersection or complementation. What do you mean by this? It means that if I take two separate languages, such as let us take L1 and L2 as my context free language, and if I perform intersection on L1 and L2, then the result of this will not be, may or may not be a context free language. And remember one thing here, union, concatenation and clean closure, they should be, the result of them should always be a context free language. Okay, the result, that means L1 union L2 are if you perform the clean closure like such as here or concatenation, whatever operation among three operations if you perform, so the result should always be, in all the cases it should be a context free language. That's why it will be satisfied, it will says that the context free languages are closed under these properties. But in intersection what happens, it may or may not, sometimes it can be or sometimes it might not be. So that's why as it not satisfying that condition that it should be in, it should be like you will get a context free line in all the case, and that's why it won't satisfy that property. That is why either intersection or complementation will not be the result of them will not be a context free language. That's why what you can say that the context free languages are not closed under both of this, either intersection or complement. But if you go with the regular languages, because this context free languages means, it is basically what you it is context free grammar. But a regular language, okay, a regular languages are closed under these operators. Okay, regular languages are closed under intersection. That means the result will always be a intersection and complementation for regular languages. Okay, now we will see how and when, why these things will going to perform. The first thing is I said union. Just now I said that if I consider L1 and L2 are context free languages, the same thing I performed here. I take an L1 and I take an L2 as CFLs, that is context free languages. Now what I should get is, I should get L1 union L2 should also be a context free language. Now let us take one example. I'm just taking L1, language L1, which is a context free language. Remember what this says that a to the power of n, b to the power of n, n into c to the power of n, where m is greater than or equal to 0 or and n is greater than or equal to 0. What do you mean by this term? What do you mean by this language? What type of strings can you will get? You will get a strings that you will get equal number of a's and b's, equal number of a's and b's, but different number of c's, but different number of c. How you will get something like that? If I assume that a b b c, now this string can satisfy this language. Why? Why? Because I have two number of zeros and two number of b's, but c's are different. Either I can have same number of c's as well, either I can have different number of c's. Suppose I can have 3 c's, 1 c's or 2 c's also. Okay, at some moment of time m and n can be equal, but not always, right? Here m is what? 3. I mean, like, what is that condition? Here if I take a to the power of 2, yeah, if I take here m is here what? 3, and what is n value? 2. So in this way that the first language represents. Similarly, if I go with the language 2, which is also a context free language. Now what this context free language L2 indicates that, L2 indicates here is that, for example, what do you mean by this? Here I have equal number of B's and equal number of C's, but I don't have equal number of A's over here. So how this expression can be? The expression something can be AA, BB, CC, like that. I have equal number of B's and equal number of C's, but I don't have equal number of A's. So in that way, the strings, whatever the number of that set of strings are the part of the language L2. Now what we have to do is that if I perform union operation on L1 and L2, let us I assume the union as L3. Now what I should have to do is that I have to make proof that L3 is also a context free language. L3 means L1 union L2. Then only I can say that union is satisfying the property of, union is satisfying the closure property. Okay, so how you are taking? Same thing we are doing here. We are just taking here the L1 part, this is L2 part, and here both n and m are greater than or equal to 0, so we taken this L1, so it is also context free. Now how can you say that it is context free? Now we'll just assume that, as you know, L1 says that number of A's should be equal to number of B's, and L2 says number of B's should be equal to number of C's. So union, so the union says that either of these two condition can be true, right? Union is how you can take like something like OR operation. Okay, their union, that means if this is true or that is true, if in both the cases it can be true, right? So their union says that either of this line point is very important. What is it? Means that either of these two condition is to be true. So if this condition, either of these two condition is true, it means that L3 is also a context free language. So what you can say that CFL are closed under union. Union means or operation, or means either this or that. So there is no such restriction is there, much more restriction on union. So that's why it's feasible to get the L3 as your context free language. Similarly, if you go with concatenation, let us assume the same case, L1 and L2 we assumed as context free language. And what we want is that L1 concatenation L2, you can have dot operator, you can say and operator, should also be a context free. So same example, but there is a little bit difference. Let us have take an example L1 where I have equal number of A's and equal number of B's, and L2 I have equal number of C's and equal number of D's, where M and N can be same or different, that is a different case. So if I take L3, which is a concatenation of two languages such as L1 and L2, this line, so I want to show that L3 should is a context free. So how you L3 means you are clubbing all of these combinations. What is that combinations? As a power of n into b power of n into c power of m into d power of m, where m and n are greater than or equal to 0. Now how can you say that? Just understand the statement first. L1 says that we have equal number of A's and we have equal number of B's. L2 says that we have equal number of C's with equal number of D's. That means C, D are in equal numbers, and L1 says A, B are in equal numbers. Now this point again is important. What this concatenation says that first number of A's should be equal to number of B's. Then number of C's should be equal to number of D's. Okay, that means whatever the number of A's, first number of A's should be equal to, if this, if A's number of A's is equal to number of B's, then you can say that number of C's is should be equal to number of D's. This is what we required, right? Okay, how can you prove this? You can take by the concept of push down automata. So you can revise the concept of push down automata, which is the part of your automata theory. So using push down automata, if you create a push down automata, what we are using here is that we are using a stack here. In that stack, what we are doing is that we are pushing first A, then we are performing pop for B, then again we push for C, then again we pop for D. Okay, so it can be accepted like a push down automata. So as you know, if when and then and when if it accepts by push down automata, okay, if a language accepts by push down automata, then you can say that it is a context free language. So using push down automata you can prove this part. Okay, what is this line you can prove by this, I mean by push down automata. So by this we can say that the given language is a context free language. So as you know, the given language, the desired language is context free language. So what you can say is that context free language are closed under concatenation. Okay, because it satisfies the property of having L3 as a context free language. Similarly, if you go with clean closure, as I said you previously just now that clean closure doesn't require two different languages, it just requires only a single language. So we just taken as L1 as a single language, which is I assume to be as context free language, because I need to prove that the clean closure of the given language should also be a context free language. So what I am going to take is that as I have taken L1 is a context free language, so the clean closure of L1, I mean how can you represent this? You are representing L1 as tree. I mean L1 clean closure will also be a context free. How? Let us take an example here. If you see L1, now you can see in L1 you have equal number of A's and equal number of B's. That means like n can be greater than 0 or equal to 0. For example, if n is equal to 0, okay, if n is equal to 0, it means we are not taking even a single number of a's or single number of b's, right? If n is 0, that means when n is 0, when n is 0, it is 0 occurrence, right? Isn't it or not? When n is 1, when n is 1, you are getting the string as ab. When n is 2, you are getting as what? AABB. Similarly, like that you will get the strings in that way. So what this clean closure will say you? The clean closure will says that it can have either zero occurrence or it can have multiple occurrences, right? So this is, I just assume to be as multiple occurrence, and this is zero occurrence. So simply what I can say is that even if I take L1 clean closure, in that sense also you will get the same strings as you're getting in the strings which you have taken in L1. So by that what you can prove is that L1 clean closure is also a context free language. So as you know, if any of the language uh, is a context free language with using the help of clean closure, then finally what you can observe or what you can say is that context free languages are closed under clean closure. That means closed under means even after performing clean closure on any language which is a context free language, basically the result of that language is also a context free language. So in this way we have proved union, concatenation and clean closure. The next is about intersection. And I said you that intersections may not be a context free. It can be or it may not be. So that means not always it will be a context free. So let us assume for intersection also we require two different languages. So as you know that the input should be a context free language. So we take in basically here as L1 and L2 as context free language. So I just taken L1 and L2 as context free languages. So what this intersections let us say us that it should need not be a means it can be, it might not be. So it need not be a context free language. How? We'll just take an example just with one example. Let us assume L1, the same example which we have seen previously in the previous example. So here we have equal number of A's and B's and I have different number of C's for L1. Similarly for L2 I have equal number of B's and C's, but I don't have equal number of A's here. Now previously we have taken union. So union means either this or that. If anything happens, then the overall condition will be true. But in intersection that will not be the case. In intersection, how you have to prove is that if I take L3, L1 intersection L2, mean L3 should be a context free, but it is not to be a context free. How? If I take the union part, I mean the common part on that, so what you will get, b to the power of n, b to the power of n is common, so anyhow we taken b to the power of n, and here a to the power of n is there, and here a to the power of m is there. So what we have taken is that we are not saying that here we are taking n or m, we are taking any one value, we stick with one value. So we stick with n because b of n is already there in both of the languages, so we stick with n. So we take an a to the power of n into b to the power of n into c to the power of n, and it need not be a context free. Why? Because sometimes you may find that m and n will be equal, sometimes you may not find that n and m will be sometimes it will be same, or sometimes it will be different. If it will be a same, then it's well and good, but it won't be always. So how we are going to do is that simply what we can say is that, as you know, L1, if you refer this point, what it says that L1, it says that we have equal number of A's and equal number of B's. That means A and B should be equal number, and L2 should be have B's and C's are in equal numbers. So the what the intersection says that both conditions need to be true. Both condition means using L3 you can say that L1 is also true, L2 is also true. Can you prove that? You can't. Why? Because sometimes you may find m and n value will be same, or sometimes you may find both are different. If they are different, you cannot prove them both as to be true. Okay, so that again here what we are using is that we are using push down automata in order to compare. I mean, like, actually what is going to happen generally is that we have a three sets here, three sets of values, but basically push down automata is just used for comparing only two ones. So as you know, it doesn't accept by push down automata. When a language doesn't accept by push down automata, remember again this is a part of your automata, I mean ALC part. Any language, if it doesn't accept by a push down automata, then that language will not be a context free language. So the same thing happens over here as well. So that's why L3 will not be, need not be a context free language. So simply you can say hence it's not a context free language. So here what we require is the condition is that it should be a true in all the aspects, but it will not be in the same case. So simply what you can say is that in intersection part, CFL will not be under closed under, are not closed under intersection. So this is regarding about the process on intersection. Now the next thing is about complementation process. So what we have to do is that we are proving in a different way here. As you know, according to the law, what you can say is that if I take L1 intersection L2, I can prove, I can write like this, right? Isn't it or not? So using this law, which proves this as to be true, now we are taking this law into account in order to prove that complementation is not being closed by CFL. Okay, I mean CFL cannot close under complementation. So how we are doing is that if you understand the logic, you know, as you know that whenever if you are taking a complementation, if a CFL were to be closed under complement, the whole right hand side, so this is my right hand side, so what is going to happen? It becomes CFL. Why? Because why it is CFL? If I say union L1 and L2, L1 union L2 is your what? CFL. I mean the language which have L1 union L2 is what? CFL. So here we have taken union. So what we can assume is that right hand side you are assuming them as, let us assume them as a CFL part. I mean it is a context free language. How? Because of using union operation here. But if you observe with the left hand side is how it will be. Left hand side we have an intersection. Okay, L1 intersection L2. Just now we have proved that intersection will not be, I mean the intersection of any two languages will not give you as context free language. So what you will get from this one, that LHS is not CFL and RHS is CFL. Will it be a logical to say like that? That if LHS is not CFL, RHS is CFL? No, we can't say. If LHS is CFL, the RHS should also be a CFL. Or if RHS is, if any one of them is not CFL, the other should be not CFL. If any one of them is CFL, the other will be a, I mean, in both the way. I mean, if LHS is CFL, RHS should be CFL. And if RHS is not CFL, LHS should also not be a CFL. But here LHS is not CFL and RHS is CFL. So what is going to happen is that by this you can say that the given condition, okay, the given condition, that means even if I apply the complementation also here, the grammar which is going to yield, I mean the language you will, whatever you are going to get by performing the complementation on the CFL, okay, because L1 union L2 is your CFL. So if you perform CFL, if you perform concatenation of CFL, if you are not getting a CFL, if you are not getting, if you are not getting CFL, that means, as you know, a left hand side you are getting as not a CFL. So simply you can say that CFL cannot be closed under complementation because both are not equal. Left hand side and right hand side are not equal. Understand, we taken in a reverse way. How we have taken is that we need to prove that complementation should be closed and CFL should be closed under complementation. So we assume in that way, and we have taken this property L1 intersection L2, and we have taken the right hand side with the help of union and complementation, and we know that whenever an union operation performs, the given language is CFL. But at the other side, at the left hand side, as you know, L1 intersection L2 is there, so which is not a CFL. So both sides are not equal. So we can say that what we assume that this right hand side is CFL is not correct. It means that a CFL cannot be closed under complementation. So that's why we have proved in this way. So intersection complementation we have proved. So this is regarding how about properties of context free language. So with this we have completed the first chapter of second unit, and moreover in the next chapter basically deals on top down parsing, and the third unit will be discussing on completely on bottom up parsing. Okay, with this top down and bottom up parsing, your 3 units will going to be get completed. So first we need to understand this top down. Just I'll introduce this second chapter. So you will be having different types of parsing method which is going to be approached in a top down manner. Top down manner means from root to child. That means whenever you are generating a parse tree, what do you mean by parser actually? Parser is with the help of given grammar, context free grammar, because what input we are taking, context free. Why we are taking context free grammar? Because we want unambiguous grammar. What we want as unambiguous grammar. That's why we are taking the input as an context free grammar. With the help of context free grammar and with the help of tokens, the parsing, with the help of the parsing process, you will going to be get generate as parse trees. So this parse tree you can have either in any of these two way, either you may have top down or bottom up parsing. So in this top down parsing, which is your second chapter of this unit, you will be learning different types of parsing methods such as recursive descent parsing and LL1 parsing. Okay, so in that we will see how this is going to work, and what are the drawbacks in recursive descent parsing which can be overcome in LL1 parsing. Okay, because LL1 parsing basically is a predictive parsing, so that we will be seeing, okay, in the next session. But meanwhile we'll just discuss regarding the parser process. If anyone says what do you mean by parser? Parser is something a way, okay, is a process. You can assume that as a process in which it takes two inputs. What is that? The first input you can take as a context free grammar. The second is that stream of tokens. This stream of tokens, who will going to give? Scanner will give. Scanner will give this tokens, right? So the scanner will give the tokens, and that tokens will be taken as an input for parser. With the help of context free grammar, you will be achieving what? Parse trees. So that achieving this parse trees you may have in top down or bottom up approach. As you know that how this parse trees is actually used to represent the syntactic structure. Parse trees is what? Simply syntactic structure. That means how the syntax of the given the language has been described, and that will be described with the help of parse trees. So this is how the role of parser. And I said you that parsing can be performed by two ways, such as top down parsing and bottom up parsing. And I said you that top down parsing is how it is going to perform from root node to leaf node. That means from start symbol, because you have set of productions, right? Context free grammar will give you what? Set of productions. Set of production basically contains a start symbol. So that start symbol is what? Your root node, and the leaf nodes are your terminals. Similarly, in bottom up parsing you will have to go in another way. You have to go in a reverse way. You have to take the leaf nodes, you have to take the terminals. Using terminals we have to visit to the start symbol, and if you are visiting to the start symbol, then you can say that the given parse tree is a correct parse tree. So that is why bottom up parsing is more powerful than top down parsing. It's just because you are actually wants to retrieve the start symbol from the given set of strings. The given set of string is actually your the leaves, and using that leaves you are going in a reverse direction towards the root node, towards the start symbol, and if you're getting the start symbol, then you can say that the given parse tree is a valid one. And the traversal, that means the visiting of the parse tree, is based on pre-order traverse. As you aware of the traversal techniques such as pre-order, post-order, in-order. So the pre-order it assumes, okay, but in bottom-up parsing it takes post-order traversal. And one more thing which I want to say is that how you are deriving the parse tree. For example, like this is my top down parsing. If I assume like this is set of production, what I have taken here is that I have taken E as E plus plus. So this is my start symbol, right? And I'm going to get E plus E because I have to go in a top down parsing way. That means I have to go in this way, right? So I'm going in this way. Now one thing you can observe here, instead of going to this side, I'm not going I'm not going to this side, I'm going to this side. That means I'm going towards left side. That means leftmost derivation of tree will be performed in top down parsing. That is why you have taken is that E stands for ID plus E. ID plus E. Again what happens, you know what will happen, E is what, E into E. So here you got E, here what you got as E into E. So in that way you are performing. And again after that finally, as you know, leftmost side there is no, as you reach to the terminal, identifier is your terminal. Okay, because of that this is how the terminal, and nothing is there in the production further. So that's why you are moving towards the right side. And again you are going towards E, then again as it completes over here, finally it reaches to this part. So that's why you can find that it is leftmost derivation. Okay, in this way you will getting what, the top down parsing. And in the bottom up parsing, what is going to happen? Yes, this is also interesting. As I said you that you have to take the string. Let us assume this is my expression. Identifier means something, a number has to be taken. So I just taken here as a number over here in bottom up parsing. And what I am doing here is that, as you know, I have to start with E. So I am going towards E because ID, I have to see the production here. So ID means where I should go to E. Then again what is going to happen, you can say that E plus ID, this one. What is this? E plus ID into ID. Again what is going to happen, further I have to go E, right? And again what is that, E plus E into ID, right? And further again you are going to E towards this side, and finally what is going to happen, E into E, right? E plus E into E. So you will be getting as what, again E into E means E. So you are getting E into E means E. So E plus E again means you will be getting as what, finally you are getting this start symbol. If you are getting this start symbol, then you can say that it is valid. So one thing what you can observe in bottom up parsing is that if you go towards from the top side, how the values are coming, the values are coming toward the right side. Okay, toward the right side. That means what you can say that, as you know, this is leftmost derivation, but this is rightmost derivation in reverse order. What you can say is that rightmost derivation in reverse order. Okay, in that sense you are going to take about bottom up parsing. So that is regarding about bottom up and top down parsing. Okay, so tracing rightmost derivation, just now we have seen, but this rightmost derivation will be in reverse order. Okay, if you take in reverse way, then you can get to know the rightmost derivation. And we'll be discussing this backtracking parser, okay, and predictive parser, which are the two types of parsers, okay, in the next coming few classes. So this is regarding the basics on top down parsing and bottom up parsing, and how this top down and bottom up parsing works here. Okay, okay, with this I complete this session today, and in the next session we'll start the types of parsing which are being used in top down parsing methods, such as recursive descent, which is just now we have seen backtracking. So that backtracking is performed in recursive descent parsing, and the LL1 is what your predictive parsing. So that will be discussed in the next class. So with this, I'll complete this class. Thank you.